Thanks for joining me today. This webinar will cover the mistakes to avoid when developing performance training. The TapRooT Root Cause Analysis process provides a standardized approach to finding and fixing the root causes of problems you find during your investigations. The training category is one of the 7 basic cause categories in TapRooT. The training category provides a way for you to identify the weaknesses in the training program when someone makes a mistake and they shouldn't have because you've already trained them. Well, during this webinar, we'll identify 5 mistakes typically seen when analyzing training programs to help you understand the impact of those mistakes so you know the importance of proactively fixing any problems you might notice in your own training programs before they cause issues. So let's just jump in. Mistake number 1. We try to fix poor performance with more training. Organizations sometimes try to train their way to better performance, and they neglect to use other human performance strategies to help people perform better. Maybe they think the extra training will make the worker be more careful next time, but that won't fix the root cause of poor performance. If they haven't made the mistake before or after training, and now they did make the mistake, obviously it's not likely that training was the problem. It's something else. And if we don't identify and fix that something else, the mistake's going to happen again no matter how much retraining we give our people. Now, retraining is probably one of the most overused and ineffective corrective actions, and we use it all the time. I don't know why that is. Well, I can guess. It's probably cheaper, it's easy, and we think that we are going to make people more careful and they're not going to make that mistake next time. Or the other thing we see is the investigation itself didn't uncover enough evidence to truly understand why somebody made the mistake. And the conversation turns to, how are we going to fix this person? And we can't fix people. People are always going to come to work bored, distracted, overwhelmed, upset one day, and they'll make a mistake. That's what we do as people. So in order to fix people, we try to retrain them, or we try to discipline them. And we usually land on retraining because it's more comfortable. But isn't retraining itself a form of discipline? I mean, how do you think people feel when you retrain them on something you've already trained them on? So it is kind of a form of discipline already, and it's not very helpful. So it's very much overused. We probably know it's more likely they made the mistake because something else that day tripped them up. And they see no real changes happen that's going to help support them the next time the situation occurs. They just get retrained. So the culture suffers as well. People need more help to perform well than retraining them on something they've already been trained in. So it does help to have a formal RCA process to identify the actual system weaknesses that are allowing those mistakes to happen repeatedly. So the goal of training is to teach people how to do a job without making mistakes. But training isn't the only strategy used for high levels of performance. Training isn't the only thing we can offer. So consider the importance of the job and decide how much training you want to put into it and how many of the other strategies we can use and leverage to reduce the risk of mistakes. For example, maybe the job's so important we don't want to rely on someone's memory of training or just their memory to get it right. Maybe it's better we give them a written procedure to follow, something they can read and do step by step. Like think the nuclear industry. You can't have mistakes in nuclear power plants. So they often give the workers written instructions, checklists, to make sure they don't have to rely on training or memory to get it right. Or maybe you decide you want to design the job better so it's easier to do. Or maybe you want to improve the work environment or introduce machines to help make things easier and things get done more effectively without error. Or maybe you decide that you're going to increase the direct supervision so the supervisors are there when mistakes are made and they can coach their people up. The second mistake we normally see: no formal task analysis is conducted before the training. Now, a task analysis is the process of listing all the tasks with the knowledge and skills necessary to successfully perform those tasks. If we don't do that, For the jobs that's performed, you run the risk of omitting necessary training for specific tasks, knowledge of requirements, or skills needed to get the job done, creating a serious risk for mistakes being made. Is it really the employee's fault when they make a mistake on a job that they weren't properly trained on? Do they sometimes get blamed? Do they sometimes get judged when they make those mistakes? Of course they do. A thorough task analysis will help reduce that risk and keep the organization's performance and culture strong. So how do we prevent it? Well, we do a formal task analysis, which includes listing all the tasks or jobs the workers perform and the requirements of knowledge or skills necessary to successfully perform the task. Create learning objectives. Incorporate them into your lesson plan. That'll help make your training standardized and effective. Mistake number 3 we see. The desired outcome is not defined before developing training. You need to know what to expect out of the worker after training. What is necessary for optimal performance? If our training doesn't prepare the worker for the job because the training wasn't prepared or delivered well, everyone gets frustrated. That means management's frustrated. Clients get frustrated. Coworkers, even the worker who makes a mistake gets frustrated because they feel it's their fault. So to avoid the mistake, identify the learning objectives you found during the task analysis and ensure they are covered during training. Determine the best sequence and structure of the training for smooth and successful delivery. Make sure the learning objectives are written in the lesson plan. List all the actions for successful completion of the task and explain the factors and criteria that influence performance. Decide how best to deliver that training. Make sure your lesson plan is specific to the job and the location. Make sure it's technically accurate and includes references and necessary instructional media that'll help them learn. Now, after you build it, give it a dry run to validate the effectiveness. Are there any gaps that still need to be addressed? Mistake number 4. There's no testing or continued training to ensure proficiency of the workers. We might have built the best training program in the world, but it's all for nothing if we don't ensure training was understood. So how's this impact if we don't do this right? Again, everybody gets frustrated. Management, coworkers, the worker, everybody gets frustrated with the poor performance and blame gets thrown around. Management might ask, how could this person make this mistake after just going through training? Well, maybe the worker was distracted during training or it wasn't delivered well that day. There could be a lot of reasons. So there should be a final check for proficiency before sending the worker out to do the job. There could be so many reasons the training didn't stick that day. Maybe there's distractions. Maybe poor delivery could have played the part. But at least we caught the issue before sending the worker out to do the work. The training program needs to have a way for the trainee to show that they understood the learning objectives and that they come away proficient with the skills and knowledge necessary to perform well. That's important information to know and document for many reasons. One of those reasons, it's really important evidence to have if you ever need to do a root cause analysis, an investigation into an incident, and training comes into question. So our last mistake. Training is poorly scheduled or poorly performed. You don't answer the questions like, when are you going to schedule consistently to be sure that training is delivered and it gets done? How do you standardize the training so it's the same for every employee that goes through it? Who's going to conduct the training, and do they have the time and resources to be effective? If we don't do that, the problems could range from just annoying repeat issues to something much more serious that affects our business or even the safety of our workers. It could affect their lives. So how do we prevent this? Well, 1, you want results, not excuses for poor performance from the worker, but also from the trainer. Maybe training is scheduled after work and people are fatigued, so it doesn't stick or it's not delivered well. Maybe the training occurs a long time before the work needs to be completed, so the worker forgets what needs to be done. So be intentional of how and when training is delivered to ensure the worker is ready to receive and that they understand the training. Be sure the worker and the trainer understands the expectations of the training, how their performance is going to be measured, and the consequences for not following the training program or non-compliance to the program. And it's always good to emphasize the benefits of delivering this training well and receiving the training well. So here's the recap of the 5 mistakes that we went over. 1, don't assume you can fix poor performance with more training. Don't develop training without a proper task analysis. Identify all the learning objectives and incorporate those learning objectives into your training plan to be sure that they're going to get covered. And to be sure they're covered and understood, develop testing to be sure the worker is proficient and competent with the skills and knowledge necessary to complete the job. And then finally, schedule the training so that the trainer and the worker have the best chance at high performance. So those are the 5 mistakes we typically see. Hopefully you've learned enough to recognize if you have weaknesses in your own training programs. If you want more information about TapRooT, you can find it on taproot.com. If you want to know more about TapRooT or see how the TapRooT process works, I'd be happy to show you. I can schedule a web meeting at your convenience and we can go through a briefing and demonstration. Finally, I'd like to thank you for the time that you spent today. Hopefully you've learned something that you can take back to your organization to make you look good. Thank you very much.